Welcome to another episode of Behind the Strategy, helping you boost your business and love life that little bit more by challenging your perspective, motivating your mind, and simplifying your strategy with today's inspiring guest who'll be sharing what's behind their own strategy.
Make sure you pop that subscribe button and share with someone who needs this today.
Fresh out of the lab, because we found the keys. Your host, Kate Whitley.
Thank you. And I knew I should have hidden those keys a lot better. Today, I'd like to introduce you to the wonderful Erin Buck. So what I love about you, Erin, is that you have a real sense about you that just helps keep people grounded. I know this from not only working with you, from being with you, but also we've been in different situations. We've been in clubhouse rooms and I've heard you speak. I've heard how you've come across to people, and you always have a really good sensibility about what it is that you're saying. And to me, you're somebody that thinks through what they're saying and doesn't like to then give out information or come across as being somebody who is going to give bad advice, is going to give poor advice. And your ultimate underlying ethic, morals, being, purpose, I would say, is because you truly want to help people. You have a real desire to help lift people up and support them. And I know it's not just a part of your strategy, that is actually you. So first of all, thank you so much for being here. And do you think that sums you up at all?
Yes, I do want to help people. And I often say, that horrible buzzword of being authentic and things like that. I see myself as down to earth. And I've always said to people that I would like them just to say the truth. Why can't we just say the truth? So I always say to people, I'm more upset about my personal life. People just saying, oh, that's fine, but then going away and being annoyed. Because how can I correct what I'm doing if you don't tell me? I've had that attitude that it's got me into trouble with my father. He didn't like me telling him what he was doing wrong. But, if you don't tell them, how can they correct it? How can they get better? And so I like to do that with the people I work with in my business. Not that I'm saying that they're wrong, but if I don't tell them how I see it, then how am I providing any benefit to them? My only problem is that sometimes I worry, Kate, when we've been talking, that I come across as having a little bit that I'm too abrupt. And then I worry that I'm coming across as a little bit cold and direct when I don't mean to be, but sometimes flowering it around is wasting time. And as you know, when you work in a business and you're on a time limit, it's easy just to go straight from A to B and not go around all the houses.
It is, absolutely. And I totally get what you're saying, because it feels when you're in a situation like that, if you don't give somebody what you see is the truth or the most helpful option, it's almost like you're doing them a disservice, isn't it? It's almost like
Yeah.
actually the opposite of helping them. In fact, you're hindering them. And people don't always want to hear what they want to hear. Some people just want a sounding board to justify what they're saying or what they're doing. But is that the way to go? Is that good for them? Is that a strategy they should have?
In fairness, though, you've
Yeah.
got to be careful. You've got to be careful. If people are using you as a sounding board,
Yeah.
you can tell them your opinion. That doesn't mean that you're right. Doesn't mean that you're saying fact. So as a sounding board, back and forth kind of thing, you have to take into account how they work, who they are, what they're trying to get to. It might not be who you are or how you work or how you would do things, but you can suggest to them, well, have you thought about doing it this way? And if they say, well, no, I want to do it this way, then they're not wrong. They just are going down the route that is comfortable for them. So you've got to weigh it up by, because you said earlier about, knowing what I'm talking about. And I do know what I'm talking about in, you say, strategy and facts, but I am in no way blowing my own trumpet in the fact that me saying I know more than the people that are using me as a sounding board. They may know more than me. They might not have seen it from a different angle, which is what I can give them.
That's key, isn't it? It's being able to being able to step back and pull through what insight you have. So my question to you about that is, have you always been like that? Were you like that growing as a child, for example? Were you somebody who liked to recognize where you could help in, step out? Was that you growing up?
No. Relating back to my dad as an example, I've always had the belief of saying it as I see it. when you're young, you have the attitude, like I said there, I have to tell them that they are wrong, because if they don't know they're wrong, how am I being fair to them to correct it? But of course, with arrogance that you have as a child and a teenager, you are steadfast that you are right. So me and my sister, as examples, same upbringing, I used to say to her, how come you don't argue with dad as much as I do? Because me, my dad, and my sister are very alike. And her reply was, because I know I'm right, but I don't need to have the validation or to tell other people that I'm right. So I let him think that he is right, knowing deep down I am, and I don't get an argument out of it. Whereas I had the injustice gene, as I called it. Dad, you are wrong, and therefore I need to tell you that you're wrong, show you that you're wrong, and then you can correct it.
So it's really interesting that you had this sort of relationship with family where you were allowed to be you, you could start to develop your insight, you could see things that weren't quite right and you were able to point them out. Was it the same with your peers at school going through first jobs? Did you get the same response from other people? Because my experience is that when I wanted to try and sort of tell people, oh, this is a better way of doing it, because I had an immature way perhaps of speaking or saying it, I hadn't quite developed tact to its fullest form. People either said, oh, thank you very much, and they were just like, yeah, they knew me well enough. Or if they didn't, they either felt that I was pointing out they'd made a mistake and would focus on that instead of actually just do this instead, or they just challenged me back for the hell of it. How was it for you?
I think humans are a complicated breed, and over the years, I have tried to come across in ways that people have often misread me as well. So, as an example, I did a workshop where I was doing something, and the woman that was running the workshop kept asking me if I was okay. And I was going, I'm fine. And then afterwards, I said, why did you keep asking if I was fine? She went, because you looked really angry. And I said, no, I was concentrating. And that's happened a few times that people think I am annoyed, but I'm not. I'm concentrating. And when I concentrate, I focus so much that they misread. And looking back, that's happened a lot. So I think it was more me than it was any fault of theirs. But we don't take, as people, we do not take criticism, and we take things really personally. So
We
when
do.
you're trying to tell people, well, have you thought about it like this? You've got to really tread carefully, because people will think that you're criticizing. And see, I'm going off on an example of my job. So, as a virtual assistant, people really find it hard to get the mindset to delegate, because
Yes.
they feel that people will assume they can't do it. And they
Yes.
take that as a self criticism of themselves. And I have said to my clients that are really stuck in their ways, you've got to change that mindset. It's not that you can't do it, it's that you don't want to do it because you've got better things to do,
Or
you
they
know?
don't need to do it
Or
because it's a
exactly, or you don't
case of,
need to.
I don't need to learn how to fix my car. Now, years and years ago, I used to have the old Ford Cortina, the Capris, the Escorts, and they weren't all fancy pants with the electronics. I could quite easily go in and change the spark plugs, change the baffles, change this, do different things for them. I say baffles, that was for the motorbike. But I could change things, I could do things, right? I wouldn't even dream. As time went on and you got better cars came out, I didn't feel the urge and the need to learn how to do that, to continue to do things in my car, because that's not what I specialize in. I would have to reluctantly pay somebody at that time. Now, obviously, we just know we have to pay somebody. But what you've just said there is exactly that, isn't it? It's recognizing where we don't need to keep learning something new, keep hold of something. Now, there's the other side of it as well, was that when we've enjoyed doing something, we can also be reluctant to let that go. But
Well,
all,
then why?
yeah,
Why should you?
yeah,
If you enjoy it and you want to do it,
yeah.
then do it. Nobody's telling you that you shouldn't.
But if
But if
it's
it's
time
stressing you out,
consuming,
time consuming,
yes,
detrimental to your mental or physical health, then why wouldn't you?
yes.
I have a cleaner. My family think I'm middle class because I have a cleaner, which I find quite funny. I got a cleaner because of my back problem, and I now am better. I know I can clean. I
Yes.
know that I'm good at cleaning, but I haven't got the time and I don't want to. So I'm going to keep my cleaner. She'll be the last thing that leaves this house. The
Yeah.
husband will leave before the cleaner. And that's my form of outsourcing. And again, I felt the same. I do a pre clean clean.
Yes.
So, I do empty the bins. That's not her job. So that there's certain things like that. I still have a standard that I think I don't want people to think that I don't do this.
And what you
But
said there with the cleaner, with me, with the mechanics, we accept that. We accept that we can't do everything in certain areas of our life. And, for finances, sometimes we try, but most of the time people don't mind outsourcing, or they're looking forward to outsourcing or getting somebody in to do jobs they can't do. Now, finances aside, because obviously that can hold people back sometimes from being able to outsource or get somebody to do something. But that aside, when it comes to our own business, the things that we feel in control of, why is it? It is a mindset. And I wonder how we get past that, because how do we let those go? How do we recognize that we don't necessarily need to be in full control? And my theory, and I'd love to hear yours on this, my theory is that it's that innate perfectionism in us. I don't mean we have to have things ultimately perfect, but we have to have things to our level of perfect to feel confident in moving forward. I'd love to hear your theory on that, because you working with lots of different people, you must see that, and you must have come up with different clients of yours, different people you've seen. They have different reasons, I'm sure. Is there a common thread to it?
every single one of them do it. Every single one. Because at the end of the day, people say this statement and then people that aren't in business sort of roll their eyes. But your business is your baby. If you had a real life baby of skin and bones, you aren't going to just hand it over and say, ta see you later. You hand it over with this bag full of stuff, this bag full of stuff. He likes to do it this way, this kind of thing. You don't just walk away. If you have that mindset when you're helping a business, also when I did teaching, and they will have provisos that they want for that child. That is perfectly understandable.
Yes.
And with having my own kids, I got it. So I took the time to explain to the parents when I spoke to them why this was happening. I tried reasonable adjustments as much as I can because these are their babies. It's the same with business. It is their baby. They're giving it to you, but they have to have this and they've got to have this and they like it this way and they like it that way. Any VA or anybody that does outsourcing who does not take that into account is setting themselves up to fail, because you're not taking over a business. You're not working for that business. You're working with that business, and you're meant to be a partnership. You're meant to take on the way that they want it. You can make suggestions, you can give opinions, but if they still turn around and say, I want it this way, then you do what they have asked you to. You've got no right to take over. And each person handing over those businesses will have a form of, to different levels of perfection, like you said.
Yes.
That some are able to just hand it over to you with a few little bits, and then some people hand it over to you with a manifesto that you've got. And that's fine. You have to be adaptable to be able to work with all these different businesses and clients.
I think that is also a philosophy that everybody in business should have anyway. And I think we can often get caught up in what we're doing in our own world. And if we're not careful, we lose sight of what's happening outside our comfort zone, so to speak, and we forget to step outside it. And our world then starts to shrink slightly, and everything relates back to us. And that's when I think we become more sensitive to what we perceive as criticism, as opposed to constructive criticism or constructive support, because that's a fine line, isn't it? And I think when we are in
Also,
business,
it's that what kind of person that if they can't handle their own self criticism and they get really affected by their self criticism and they don't see it as a positive building on experience, they won't be very open to receiving other criticism. And criticism doesn't have to be a bad thing.
no,
Criticism is not you telling
no.
somebody what you've just done is poop. What you're saying is it could be better this way, but it's still good. But you just need to work on it this way.
Yes, and the whole word itself, quite often it's the use of language that we use, isn't it? So if we use the word criticism, our brain defaults to it being negative. So feedback, let's have feedback. Now, some people might say, well, that's a bit flowery, let's tell it how it is. But actually, if that can just change the loop, can change the messages, can just shift inside your mind, you're having some feedback. Could ask people for feedback, or a lot of people ask, can you run your eye over this? Could you you have a look at this? And I think you've said to me, if you want me to have a look at it, if you want me to run my eye over it, if you want me to give you some feedback, it's the use of those language that my brain goes, oh, yes, please, instead of going, oh, I mean, you're not going to turn around to somebody and go, would you like me to give you some constructive criticism?
Yeah,
Like,
do you want me to
yeah,
criticise your stuff?
it's quite a formal sort of thing, bit of jargon to say. Would you like me to constructively criticise what you're doing? No, I mean, I do website audits, and in that, I am going to put out things that they need to do and change. It's feedback, isn't it? So it's also recognising that within ourselves when we want to work with other people, whether we're outsourcing, whether we are being outsourced to, with all our clients. What you pulled out and what you said earlier was so important, is that everybody has their own unique perspective, their unique way of doing something, and we have to respect that. We have to. And I've met people that don't, and I'm sure you have met people that don't. And I'd love to know, how do you, or have you, dealt with or worked with or come to an agreement within yourselves or with them to move past that? When you're working with somebody and you bobbing along and you give some feedback or you're discussing something and there's this constant yeah but, you've already said that you would say, okay, well, we'll just do it your way. But sometimes people then stop wanting to give you all the facts because they know that you might be pointing out things in a different way to them. And quite frankly, I think they might just want confirmation that they just want to move on. But that doesn't always equate to a positive working relationship. And that's when working relationships can break down. So my question is, you must have been in that situation with the amount of clients that you've had, with working as a teacher in any of your jobs. How did you learn to manage that and incorporate that into your resilience?
Iron Man. I can't completely deflect things. I do take things not personally, but I suppose I take the responsibility of it on my shoulders that sometimes I shouldn't do. I'm very lucky in the fact I wouldn't say that any of my relationships with my clients have broken down. We have moved on, but that's either because they are growing in a different direction and they don't need what I can offer anymore, or I've found that their priorities have changed and therefore it becomes harder for me to work with them because they too busy and therefore not getting back. But that's not a negative thing, it's just the fact that you've drifted apart and so helping each other anymore, so it's better to step away. I have done that, but still with I've still with nothing majorly, well, nothing ever negative. I can still go back and get a reference off them.
Yeah.
We've just gone different
Yeah.
ways. So yeah, I don't think anybody's resilient. I don't think that person exists. I think it's fake. It's one of that things about social media. We all have our doubts. We all feel bad from time to time, and we all can take things personally. I would say age, experience makes you that little bit stronger, but it doesn't make you resilient.
That's really, really interesting because it's about evolving who we are. I believe we constantly evolve and we have to step into that evolvement. We have to recognize that our wants, needs, desires are well, they will change. It's not just that they're likely to, but some people don't recognize they want things to be this way and hope it's going to stay this way. But actually, everything always evolves. Life always throws things at you. And it's how we deal with that.
Absolutely. The person you are
Yes.
now is not the person that was there at 30 or the teenager or the
Yes.
child. That's why when you're 5, people want to be doctors and policemen and nurses. When they're 18, they just want to not have a
Yeah.
hangover.
Love it. Yes.
Your priorities really, really do
Yes.
change. So your life is made up of different people. You're not the same person at all.
No, you're not. And the fact is that it's interesting, isn't it? Because when we're in the here and now, when we're in the right now, I can only act, respond, and look forward based on the information and the experiences that we have had, the information that we hold, how we have perceived things, and the conclusions we've come to then move forward. We do learn from that. Our brain, evolutionary, it just constantly adapts and reassesses to either confirm or get rid of thoughts, processes, and do this again and don't do that again to help us in our instinct for survival, so to speak.
Was also with it evolving, you do not know the answer right at the beginning. So going back to our
That's key.
businesses, we set up our business And we think we have an idea of what it's going to be, but then actually working that business, it's going to evolve because you didn't know everything to begin with. And as you learn, you make your business better. Like you say, you evolve and you start to put in the knowledge that you've gained, the experience that you gained. So therefore it's evolving over time. So the strategies, going back to strategy lab and all that lot, the strategies that you've started with are not going to be the strategies that work a year down the line. And it's why you should do your business reviews, because I do reviews of software that I use, because the software I've used in months 1 to 6 might not be fulfilling what I need. So why am I paying for
Yes.
it? So you regularly review what resources that you're using. So again, it's the same. It's all evolving, business and
It is, and
life.
that is a really good strategy to have. So I would say then, if we're talking about what's behind the strategy, it's to keep moving forward with the strategy. Recognize that the strategy itself, before you can go behind it, the strategy itself has to evolve. You have to recognize it's going to keep evolving, and to be mindful and recognize that those changes may come into play. And it's also about when people say, oh, you look at where you want to go, enjoy the journey. Yes, that's very good. But the journey is what you make it, isn't it? You can make it really difficult for yourself by just trying to make something work with what you've got or not changing and moving, or you can go with the flow. There's quite often there's always something. Oh, cat's done it again. Quite often there's something better around the corner on a different path, and quite often on another path there isn't. You hit a brick wall or something, you get a curveball thrown at you. That's life. And knowing that we feel right now, what we're doing is right, we know what we're doing 100%. This, my theory is, if we don't keep learning, I don't mean by going out and buying lots of expensive courses, I mean learning about people. You have, Erin, you have developed a great insight into how people are. You've taken that on board and you recognize people for what their worth are, and you respect each person for their own individuality, their uniqueness, and for who they are. And that trust,
The thing is, I've always been interested in
yes,
people watching and in why people do what they're
yes,
doing. So I have always watching the world and his wife go by, is what my
love that.
father-in-law used to say. I do look at people, and from that, like you say, I like watching people. You're looking at them. You're not insular. You're not looking at you and how you're going to change their world. You're looking at how they're changing their world and how can you get on the journey with them.
Into the strategies and pulling that in, and then we can wind it down.
Okay, you can always do like mini recordings, but
Yeah,
so we were saying about how you have to evolve through business and through life and everything. And
yes,
then I was going to say, but there will be people out there that don't evolve because they don't believe that self ego, that they don't need to evolve. Everybody else needs to fit with what they have. And there are people out there that do that. I always came across it before COVID. The businesses that refused to go digital, that
yes.
refused to go online, and then lockdown and COVID came, and then they all went, whoa, what do we do now? Obviously, it was beneficial for me because
Yeah,
then they needed a VA that could show them how to do it.
me as well.
But
That's why it's the course I did. It helped
so
people who
I'm not
hadn't thought
knocking
of
those
it
people.
before. No, no, no. And
They're our
in fact,
clients.
we all have a catalyst, don't we? It just goes to show that sometimes the catalyst for us to move forward doing anything, let alone just in our business, has to be huge and external.
If you're that type of person.
Yes, if
But
you
then you've
are.
got
Yes,
people that don't need the outside catalyst, they have the internal push that
yes,
makes them want to keep moving forward. So
yes.
there are two different kinds of, as you say, strategies for two different kinds of people.
Yes. And we each develop our own strategy, don't we? So for you to sum up, for you to pull through, you have your strategy. For me, I see your strategy as being that you are open to listening, you are open to learning, you are aware that you need to move forward, you are aware that we need change. If there's ever going to be a transformation, transforming means changing anyway. So there can't be one without change, and that this is an ever evolving place to be as people within our businesses, within life.
I think every career should be like that. And because my
Yes.
background in my training, so I went to university to train as a nurse. Now, a nurse that trained in 1966 whatever, it was different. We did not have the knowledge and the medical availability that we have now. And if
Yes.
they did not keep training and evolving, then they wouldn't learn how to do stuff, and our healthcare would be back in 1966. It's the same with any business. With you and me, technology, it is so fast changing. If you don't learn how to do the platforms or to do the technology that's coming, or outsource to somebody that does, then you're going to be left behind. Same with teaching, education. If you are somebody that doesn't feel that they have to keep learning, then in my opinion, not my fact, but in my opinion, I think you're wrong.
I'm going to agree with you. If you look to those types of professions, I was a social worker. I also was, doing teaching as well. If you look to any of those professions, there is continuing professional development, and it's there for a
Absolutely.
reason. So we need to, if we're not in that position, if we're not in that type of business anymore, it doesn't mean we don't need to do that. I think, in fact, we need to do it even more. I'm going to use, for example, the GDPR, that when we were in the EU in 2018 with GDPR, when that came in for data protection, everybody got in a muddle about it, didn't they? A lot of people all decided, oh my gosh, I need this, oh, I don't need this. There was a lot of confusion, and people wanted to learn what it wanted to need. Some people thought they didn't need it. And now we've come out, the rules have changed. We still have UK GDPR, and we have privacy rules, we have privacy legislation. This is for anybody around the world. Okay, this is not just for people who are in the jurisdiction of that, because it impacts everybody. And if we don't evolve with it, if we think everything doesn't apply to us and we don't need to know about it, it will impact our business. It will impact how we do business. And that will obviously impact our life, because the amount of people whom I've worked with, looking at websites, looking at helping set up things, who don't have an up-to-date privacy policy, who don't even have the copyright up to date on their website, because they haven't checked through policies that have been there for years, without reviewing just the practical things that we need to review as well. That can have a huge impact. And again, it leads back to what you said. Those are the things that we need to have for our continuing professional development. And without that, how can our business evolve and grow? And then how can we grow? We can't. We
Absolutely.
can't. I think we can't.
No, we can't. If you're not willing to take stuff on, then you are going to be in 1966.
Yes.
But why would you be? That's the part that I don't have that mindset. I don't believe that I am an expert. I don't believe that I know everything. I'm not a guru. There's always someone that is going to come along that's better than you,
Yes.
that knows more than you. And I am open to listening to them telling me what I should be doing. Whether I then follow that advice, again, it's just like parenting,
Choosing.
then that's up
You
to
have
me.
the choice.
Yeah, but I am still going to listen, because what they tell me might be something that actually just like is brain blowing. It's like, oh, why haven't I been doing that before? If you're closed off from that,
Yeah.
then I don't think you're right. You're not going to grow.
And that, to me, is a really key part of what is behind the strategy. It's about surrounding yourself and being with people and who do know more than you, because otherwise, how would you ever grow? If you always only ever want to be the expert in the room and teaching people in the room, you may be helping them, but at some point, there's going to be a percentage of those people who are going to overtake you and know more than you and have more expertise in that specific field or area or topic than you do. Can you recognize?
That's why when you're running your business, you shouldn't be overloading yourself with taking stuff on. Even if you're not doing a course, if you're not making time for your own admin, your own learning, your own CPD, like you say, people are going to overtake you, and then people are going to go to them because you've not made time. So people don't tend to do it because they think, oh, well, this day I could be earning more money, but that might be detrimental in the future, because if you don't keep moving forward, then you're eventually going to stop earning that money, and you should have done it back then and done without it then, so that you keep on going forward, if that makes
It
sense.
makes perfect sense. And, and I wanted to sort of end with just a brief touch on, you had one business, you had a business with, with dogs, didn't you? And
I
then
did.
you had, your health, feel free to talk about or not, but that impacted how you then had to do business, and you had to do a pivot and a completely drastic change, because it wasn't just, oh, what's going on in the world, like people had, like you just mentioned in the pandemic, oh my gosh, now what do I do? You had it's like, oh my gosh, this is life. Now what do I do? Because it impacted more areas. And yet I didn't know you then. I only see you now after the fact. And that has obviously had a deep impact on you, how you see people, how you now pace yourself and continue to have the behind of the strategy of evolving still, don't you?
Yes, I mean, career-wise, I have evolved over the last 30 years
Yes.
from the different careers that I've had because I've tried something, I've not liked it, it's not worked for me. So I've walked away because I don't care that I've spent 2.5 years
Yeah.
studying. I only had 6 months left till I would qualify as a nurse, but I walked away 2.5 years into the
Yeah.
course because I decided that that wasn't what I needed to be. And I am pleased that I had the strength to do that and not just continue because I only had 6 months to go.
Yes.
And then obviously you have children. So then my career went down the route of what kind of job could I fit around. I didn't want to just go to work. I wanted a career of my way. So then I went into teaching.
Yeah.
And then, like you say, my health problems. So I was teaching, I ruptured a disc in my back. I ended up having a back operation. I was off for 6 months. When I went back to teaching, I'd lost the love for it.
Right.
And I realized that, again, it had reached the end of my teaching career. Every job that I've had, and this is not me blowing smoke up my own bum, but every job that I've had, I've been that focused to keep moving forward that I've always reached the top of where I could go. So when I say teaching, I was a TA,
Yes.
but I worked way through till eventually I was a HLTA. I couldn't go any
Yes.
higher than going back to uni to become a teacher. And then I always stop. So when I worked in a shop, I became the supervisor quite quickly because I learned and pushed myself out there. So when I went back to teaching, I'd reached the top level that I could. There was nowhere for me to go. I loved the kids, but the change in the health problem had made me decide that I needed to have in a wheelchair that I wanted to live my life. So I decided to leave teaching and I started a dog boarding business because I absolutely love my dogs. And again, I could have just opened up my house, took dogs in, took the
Yes.
money, but I'm not like that. I went and did that. And while I was having them in, I went on training courses. So I learned how to do doggy enrichment. I learned how to do basic training. I kept on doing these courses. I learned how to write policies so that I had the right policies in place for my business. I learned how to write packs up so that I was able to get the right information. And I kept on progressing like that when my back went a second time.
Ah.
And I had a second back operation. And my husband and my children ended up walking the dogs, and I would then look after them during the day. And after the third time I had a third back operation, I thought, right, okay, we can get back on it when I lost feeling in my legs 6 weeks after the third
Scary.
operation. Yeah, I got drop foot and ended
Very
up in
scary.
Salford. This was 2 weeks before COVID
Oh my
lockdown
gosh.
happened. So I went into COVID and the consultant said to me, you have to shut your business. There is no way you can look after and walk dogs without taking a risk that if a dog pulls you, your back could go again. And the next time, your fourth operation, we cannot do the same as what we've done these last 3 times, which was micro
Yeah,
disectomy
and
kind
that
of
must
thing.
have been even more devastating with you love the animals. I wonder if that was more devastating to suddenly not be able to do that than it was to have come to the decision that, nursing's not for me, teaching, I've done that. But to then suddenly you've got into the pattern, you love dogs, and
I'd started my own
yes,
business for the
that
first
must have been
time and
more
it had been really
devastating. Yeah.
successful. Yeah. And I had never, in the 18 months that I had my dog boarding business, I was not stressed. I was really relaxed. Even now, when people say, oh, you must really love your job. Yes, I do. But I will always love
Yes.
that job that was my
Yeah.
perfect business. So I felt then not only a loss in my physical of my leg, because I then had been described as
Yeah.
disabled. Yeah, that was really hard to
Yeah.
come to because, like you said, and it's hard to accept a label that takes things
Yes.
away. And then I'd lost this business. So I was sat there, and my husband rightly said to me, you have to think of something. You cannot sit here, otherwise, you're going to get depressed. And it was like, I can't do this, I can't do that. And then as I, got my own head around it, it was like, yeah, no, I never stop. I don't just
Yeah.
accept something. I need to figure out what am I going to do. Couldn't think of what I was going to do that allowed me to lie on my back while I work if I
Yeah.
choose to, or hospital appointments, or if sometimes I need to take painkillers and I'm not going to work, that I can just say I'm not working this afternoon and it's not going to be a problem for my
Yes.
boss. So I was thinking about things like that, and I got talking to the woman that ended up being my very first client, who happened to be my neighbour 2 doors down.
Good
And we
start.
were stood, yeah, we were stood talking, and I was like saying to her about how I needed to do something. And she's like, "Oh, there'll be something out there." And I went to bed that night, and I often say that I am my most productive as I wake up
Ah,
because I dream
that's
about
interesting.
things. So I have a notebook next to my bed that when I wake up, all my displays at teaching would always come to me in a dream, and I would sit up and I would draw them on a pad of paper so that I could then go back and do the
Oh, I love that.
displays and how
Love
I was going
that.
to do them. And I do the same thing now. And I woke up and I dreamt that I had organised her with her
Ah,
filing. And then I suddenly thought, well, how am I going to do that? And that's when I researched and found virtual assistants. And I thought, I can do that. I am really proficient with computers. I'm married to a computer programmer. My whole life has been
perfect.
computers. I am overly organised, colour code to
Oh,
everything.
love
And
it.
I just thought, oh my God, this is something I can do. And that is when I started Busy Bee. And what I tell other businesses now when I talk to them or I say, you can do it. I was a 44-year-old woman that had had a few different careers. I'd had my children. I had no experience of marketing or the business world. And so I just threw myself across social media, which I had experience of social media, personal level. And I learned as I went, even though I had the core skills of organizing and I knew how the software worked, I had to learn how to market my business as well as run my business. And that has taken time. So the people that you come across that want you to help them suddenly become successful overnight, and you have to say to them, no, it's a long process of
Yes.
strategies that you have to put into place, and it is a long game, and you have to be prepared to put in the long journey, not the
Yes.
quick
And
fix, the things
yeah,
that you've got to
and
put
your
in.
strategy that you have of knowing that things will evolve, knowing you need to learn things, knowing you need to take time, and knowing that it's a work in process, and it always is process, progress. It's always moving forward. If you keep focusing on what's happening, reviewing, that strategy was key for you right there and starting what you
Yeah.
had, because you started from where you were right then. What have I got? What can I do right now? And let's see if that's going to work. What do I need to do next? And that is a key strategy, isn't it?
It is. Somebody asked me the other day about starting as a virtual assistant. I always say I started with my logo. I had an idea of what I was going to call my business, but I didn't then just suddenly start
No.
getting clients. There's a basic core
Yes.
section of if you're going to start a business, you need this
Yes.
in place, you need this in place. And you fill those steps in. Those are things you're in control of. You can do them. And then from then on, it's the whole marketing and getting to know people and getting
Yeah.
people to know you, building up, talking more. You've got to shout about yourself and you've
Yes.
got to be heard. It's a slow process, but
It is, and
it's a
it's a good
worthy one.
strategy. And what's behind the strategy for me, and I think I'm going to sum this up from everything you've said. We've looked at your strategies, we've looked at different things you have behind the strategies of how you as a person have taken that on board to move forward. And the key thing for me that I can pull from you, and tell me if I've got this right, is that behind the strategy for you, Erin, is that you need to step into what you want to be, where you want to go. You need to try it on, see how it fits, and then amend and review where necessary. But you have to have that mindset of stepping into it to actually then be able to put the strategies into place. Would that make sum it up?
Yes, absolutely. I didn't have all the
No,
strategies lined up
no,
before I started. That leads to
yes,
procrastination. You have to have the basic bits. You step
yes,
into it, like you say, and you keep going. You just keep going forward. But you also should have the strength, like I learned with my other careers, is having the strength to walk away
yes,
from it. It's
no,
not negative on you if it hasn't worked. It just wasn't your path. You thought it was when you began, but as you've evolved, like you say, it wasn't my path. And I had to make the choice to move away from it and start afresh. And you have your little bit of
yes,
licking your wounds because it hasn't worked, and you beat yourself up with your self criticism, like we said. But then you take what you've learned and that experience and you shift it to the next road and the next journey. You don't leave what you learnt behind, take it with you start again, and you'll start walking in the next
and
direction.
stepping into it and giving it your all is the only way, because if we do things half-heartedly, then our heart's not in it, we don't have the passion, the chances are it's not going to work, and we had this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, oh well, I knew it wasn't going to work. Well, my theory is that it was only not going to work because you hadn't actually planned for it to work, you hadn't stepped into the possibilities, you'd looked at it from a different angle, and you don't do that. And I love that. What a way to end the most amazing conversation with you, Erin. You are someone I admire very deeply and whose thoughts and opinions on life I respect so much, because you are a real person, you're true, you're honest, and you are a perfect person to have in somebody else's world. I absolutely love you.
I
You are
blush.
amazingly awesome. Honestly. So, Erin,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much for having such a wonderful conversation, for sharing your insights, for telling us how it is, and for giving such good strategies, and also for us to know what for you behind the strategy can actually be so helpful for everybody else. Erin, you are a dream to have spoken to.
Thank you for inviting
Thank
me.
you so much. Thank you.
You've just listened to a Strategy Success Lab production of Behind the Strategy with Kate Whitley, bringing you inspiring guests and motivating messages to challenge your perspective and simplify your strategy.
Don't forget to subscribe and pop over to strategysuccesslab.com for more exciting episodes. And if you've loved this episode, go and share it with someone else who needs it today.